We're going to talk about that horrific triple murder in Tallaght over the weekend with Kitty Holland, the social affairs correspondent of the Irish Times. Kitty, details are emerging. We're obviously limited in the degree to what we can say, but of what is known at this point, the incident began just after midnight, Saturday night, Sunday morning.
Yes, what we know is that the 18-year-old girl who's now deceased, Lisa Cash, was at home in Rossfield Avenue in Brookfield area of Tallaght. She was babysitting her younger twin brothers and sister, Chelsea and Christy, who are 8, and her 14-year-old brother. And there are some reports as well that there was an infant in the house as well who was unharmed. The incident began about midnight, where a man who was known to the family arrived in a taxi at the house and got into the house and then barricaded himself in. It appears that we don't know the order in which this happened, but that he inflicted multiple stab wounds on Christy and Chelsea, the 8-year-olds, and on Lisa. The 14-year-old boy managed to escape through a back window. He sustained quite serious injuries jumping out the back window, but he was pulled in over the garden wall then by his neighbour and was able to raise the alarm. At that point, a relative who lives about sort of 10 doors up the road, I'm not sure exactly how many doors, but up the road on Rossfield Avenue, was alerted, and the guards were then called. Obviously, the full emergency services, ambulances, fire brigade, all arrived at the scene. By this stage, from having talked to the neighbours, there was a huge commotion. There was a lot of screaming. Obviously, there were sirens, broken glass, lights. The Garda helicopter was overhead. This brought dozens and dozens of neighbours, including children, out onto the road, who witnessed the whole thing unfolding. And the scenes that they describe are really harrowing and, as you say, probably can't be reported, but witnessed a really harrowing event unfold over about an hour. And talking to the neighbours and indeed witnessing children yesterday crying and embracing themselves, this is a really, really traumatic event on the road.
And grossly so for the children involved, because in any incident like this that involves the death of young children, one of the
Yeah.
issues is how does it get communicated to peers, to friends,
Yeah.
to other school kids? How do you explain it to children who were witness to some of it is
I
a
know.
horrifying
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. I mean, what we know then is that the emergency services arrived, that the tried to reason with the man in the home who had perpetrated this violence, and he had to be sort of restrained with non-lethal devices, including, I understand, tasers and CS gas. And the children, the younger children, were found on the ground outside beneath a upper window. And I understand it was such a horrific scene for the emergency service that they and the Gardaí, a lot of them have required counselling and support afterwards. So the children, including Lisa, Christy and Chelsea, the three of them were taken to Crumlin Hospital, where they pronounced dead. The 14-year-old boy is, I understand, still in Tallaght Hospital. We're being treated for serious injuries. I understand probably broken limbs and bruising and that kind of thing from the jump. And the mother, who was in her 40s and was out at the time, was treated for shock and minor injuries, probably not injuries, but certainly shock, and was released from hospital yesterday.
And am I correct in saying that Christy and Chelsea, the 8-year-old twins, were already outside the house at the point that the guards managed to get in, and on entering they found Lisa Cash at the base of the stairs?
That's what I understand, yeah.
The suspect who has been arrested, the reports are indicating, and I think the Gardaí have made clear, that he was known to the family for all of their lives. At this point, the guards have 24 hours in total to question, and slightly more if you include breaks and all the rest of it. Is that correct?
They're 24 hours. So he was arrested, obviously early on Sunday morning, late on Saturday night. He was taken to Tallaght Garda station. Apparently he had to be brought to hospital at some point to be just looked over medically and to be psychiatrically assessed. So that caused a break in the time, the 24-hour. He probably would have rested overnight as well. And I understand that he must then be either charged or released and I would assume a file will go to the DPP in those circumstances by sometime this evening. So there may be a court appearance this evening where we'll, get more details like his name and that kind of thing. But yes, he was known to the family. He probably would have been, if not welcomed to the home, but at least allowed in, so he got into the home anyway, and he was brought there by taxi. So I understand the Gardaí, who will be obviously having to interview a large number of people who witnessed these events, and also the taxi driver, as part of the investigation.
Kitty Holland, thank you very much. That is Kitty Holland, who is social affairs correspondent of the Irish Times. Our reporter Michael Dooley joins us from Tallaght. And Michael, we heard from Kitty Holland just after the 9 o'clock news about the nature of the attack, and she detailed how a man in his 20s had arrived at the home, had entered, and that the alarm was raised as a 14-year-old sibling of those who were attacked managed to get over the wall to neighbours, and the alarm was raised. As I understand it, the first responding police were local Gardaí, and then the response increased in waves thereafter.
You're right, exactly, Anton. The first response was from local Gardaí, and then the armed support unit were called in for assistance. This led to a bit of a standoff because the suspect barricaded himself inside the house. Now, you spoke of the 14-year-old earlier there. He said to have jumped from the back window. Now, he did sustain injuries in that fall, but his neighbours were actually very proactive. They pulled him over their wall, and they were able to alert the authorities. So there was really some heroism from them.
And as we heard, much of this, because of the noise and the duration, it drew local community and neighbours out of their houses, and it unfolded in front of a lot of witnesses. That obviously must have had a deeply traumatic impact on the local community.
Absolutely. Neighbours they say they've heard screams of help. They heard sounds of a violent scuffle. I actually spoke to a young fella as I was leaving the scene yesterday. I'd say he was only 10 or 11 years old. He was standing outside his garden. Everyone was all day. They were in shock. They didn't really know where to be. They spent a lot of time on the street consoling each other. But this young lad, as I said, only about 10, he said his mum ran down to the scene as the incident was ongoing. A lot of the neighbours would have done the same. And he was saying how he, stayed put at the house to protect his young sister. And just hearing these stories, it's unbelievable. There really aren't any adequate words to explain an event like this. It's just nonsensical.
And you're there in the community now. What's the sort of reaction that you're seeing today? How are people dealing with it?
I'm at the scene right now. The area is still closed off on Rossfield Avenue at the moment. Gardaí actually say forensic examinations could go on into tomorrow. In terms of those who are out and about, I understand that school has resumed. It's quite a quiet day. I spoke to the parish priest earlier, who said that there's been droves of neighbours in for the last couple of days, yesterday and today, just to light a candle and offer prayers. And it does sound like the Brookfield community as a whole is one that's very, very tight-knit. So they're sticking together and looking after each other. But I think it is the case that most residents still haven't processed what's happened. And I completely understand that. It's impossible to comprehend. Particularly
given the brutality of it. The Gardaí were said in a statement that support services and counselling services were being provided to their members who had attended the scene. For Gardaí to be offered that kind of counselling and support after attending at a crime scene would indicate how violent it had been.
It really does speak to the gravity of the situation, and it is extremely morbid as well, especially with so many children involved. For Gardaí to grapple with is one thing, but even for the residents and the friends of the kids and schoolmates, it could be even more difficult. But I have been reassured by local councillors and the parish priest also that there is adequate support being sent into both the community and the school to make sure that people are able to heal in the long term after what's been an absolutely awful event.
I should say that for anybody who is affected by the matters that we're discussing, the Samaritans helpline, where volunteers are on duty 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, is a free phone helpline. It's 116 123, or you can email joe@samaritans.ie. That's Joe@samaritans.ie.